All right, welcome to another edition of International PR and Advertising. I'm Dr. Roxy Ola Akuma, and it's a pleasure to have you here. Now, whether you're one of my students, a communication professional, a business owner, or even a content creator, or someone who is just interested in understanding how public relations and advertising shapes our world, you are in the right place. So, before we continue, I believe you'll find this video very valuable. And don't forget to subscribe, like and follow us, and then also hit that subscribe button so that you do not miss any of our episode. So, what's happening today in this episode? We'll be looking at how you can think or act like an international PR and advertising professional using case studies and applications so that it's very practical and you really would know what to do. All right, let's go into it right now. Okay, so over the past several weeks, we've been exploring how communication influences governments, businesses, brands, and even the reputation of entire countries, right? Today, we're bringing all of those ideas together in one practical session. As we move through today's session, I encourage you to think beyond, just what you've been seeing and ask yourself, if I were a communication consultant or a PR practitioner responsible for situations, what would I do differently? So today in this training, we'll be looking at some key concepts, analyzing case studies, and recommending solutions. Basically, you need to understand how communication professionals solve real world problems, apply public relations and advertising theories to practical situations, okay, and learn how countries, organizations, and brands manage their reputation. Also, you'll be able to see how PR professionals and advertising practitioners also communicate and use communication strategies. And then at the end of the day, I believe you'll be thinking like an international PR and advertising practitioner. So, we're going to be reading some case studies to identify problems, and let's just dive in. Well, let's paint the scenario first, okay? Because we just have to imagine that tomorrow morning, you receive a letter appointing you as the PR officer for your country, okay? And I'll be using Nigeria as a case study. So, for example, your first assignment will be to improve Nigeria's global image, and immediately you have to ask yourself, what positive stories can Nigeria tell the world? It is very, very important. Now, many people will focus only on Nigeria's challenges. So far, it's been corruption, insecurity, unemployment, and the economic hardship. While this is very true, these are real issues. They are not the complete story. Okay, so how do we turn the narrative and show what Nigeria can offer, even as a PR practitioner? So Nigeria is widely known around the world, for Afrobeats, the Nollywood, fashion, sports, even talented young entrepreneurs, right? So if you've been employed, for example, as a PR officer working for the federal government of Nigeria, for example, how would you change the narrative? Now, this is what takes us into those dimensions we've been learning, starting with soft powers, okay? And soft powers would be the first because it simply means a way that you will be able to influence through attraction, culture, music, film, diplomacy, or innovation. In simple terms, soft power means influencing people through action rather than using force. Countries become admired because of their culture, their education, their innovation, their diplomacy, and even creativity. And as a PR practitioner who, for example, is standing to change the narrative, you will be looking out for the Nigeria soft power. What do we currently have? So, if asked how to improve Nigeria's reputation, avoid vague statements, avoid vague policy write ups or drafts that says things like the government should do better. Instead, your job is to recommend practical communication strategies such as nation branding campaigns, international media engagements, digital storytelling, cultural diplomacy, and even partnerships with influencers or the Nigerian diaspora. Okay, so this is one thing that you can do to ensure that you are telling the story. So, improving Nigeria's reputation communication strategies would be using some of these avenues or some of these strategies to ensure that you're going to be able to build on stronger international engagements across the country and across the globe. Okay, so this takes us to another case study. Now, let's take a look at this one. This is about advertising across countries. So, for example, a company wants to advertise free drink in Nigeria, Ghana, India, and the United Kingdom using exactly, the same advert. So the question is, as an advertising officer, would you be able to advise the company otherwise? How would you advise, your company otherwise? Can or could one advert work in Nigeria, Ghana, India, and UK at the same time? The truth is, the answer is no. Very, very no, because communication is never a one size fit all, okay? Because different countries have different languages, religion, customs, even their humor, what they consider humorous is different. Their colors, their symbols, their family structures, and even the consumer expectations. As such, would say that the short answer is no. The same cannot work because of this. Even the purchasing power. Okay, so what you would consider a very strong advert in Africa, for example, will be different from what you put out there in Asia, what you put in Europe, etc. So, because just imagine, advertising beef products, it would not work in India, right? Or would it work elsewhere, but it may not just work in India? That message is not the same that you'll be selling out there. So it would raise a lot of controversy. And, where many Hindus, for example, consider cows sacred, you do not want to go out there, trying to push a beef advert in that society or that environment. So this is what you have to avoid as a communication professional. Your job is to understand, the culture before designing your messages. Else, you may fall into the trap where you would have lost your what do they call it now? Your investments. Let's take a look at another case study. This one is very interesting. A campaign encouraging people, to clean their, to keep their environment clean, becomes very popular online. And let's say, for example, the campaign records about 2 million video views, 500,000 likes, 150,000 comments, thousands of shares. Yet, many streets in the city remain dirty even after the campaign ends. A lot of people are still throwing trash, people are throwing things out of their windows. The question would be, did the campaign really succeed? And if it did not succeed, what happened? What would come into consideration here as a PR practitioner or as a professional is the emphasis that communication success goes beyond social media metrics. Okay, high online engagement without behavioral change is equal to failure for that campaign. That's the truth, because somehow, to a large extent, you would have prepared your target to, achieve a certain goal, to say XYZ percent of persons or women and children or youth would, be able to accept this message and take action. As such, if you measure and you begin to see that you have all of these million views and no action that has changed behavior, then your campaign will not sound successful. Okay, because it's not, it may look successful, it may, the numbers here may look very beautiful, but that campaign has not necessarily been successful. Because if people continue throwing rubbish on the street after the campaign, then the communication objective has not been achieved. So, this is why PR professionals use what we call the KPI indicators, or we'll say key performance indicator. Basically, what is a key performance indicator? It's a measurable way. As the question is what we are doing, what we plan to do, what was the result, did we get what we intended to get? So it's a measurable way of knowing whether a campaign has achieved its objectives. That's very simple. And you are looking at some indicators. It's just like when you're driving and you want to know if your fuel gauge, or you want to see how fast you're running. There's an indicator on your dashboard, right? So that shows you how fast you're going, or how much fuel you have left. So in terms of key performance indicators, measuring successful campaigns or advertisements, you want to be able to measure awareness, engagement, participation, and behavior change. Okay, if it's an advert, you want to be able to see how many people are coming for the product, not just awareness, just not they're not just knowing about it. So you have to move from, say, the campaign objective, you put out the campaign activities, then you have to check the results and evaluate them. This all would happen first on paper, because your campaign objective, of course, is on paper. The activities you plan to carry out is on paper. Your campaign results, what you intend, your target result, will be on paper, and your evaluation style will be on paper before you go out there, to push that out. Else, you would end up wasting your resources. So, a simple way to ensure that we are not just guessing, are we successful? We're not successful. This was good. This was a very good thing, seeing all of that, is to know what originally was your campaign objective. That way, you'll be able to measure. So, apart from likes and shares, you would ask yourself, how else can we measure success? How else? If we're not using like and shares, we're not using comments, how else? Now, these are other ways, and this significantly are very helpful ways for you to be able to measure your campaign, okay, or evaluate them. You can use surveys, you can use interviews, observations, community participation, behavior change, media coverage, website visits, event attendance, and most especially community feedback. If you are keen to community feedback, you would know what to expect, and you will know how to plan for the future. Now, remember, we can put it in such a way to explain it so that you break it down. Just say engagement measures attention. Okay, so when you're looking out for the engagement, what you're trying to say is that you're trying to confirm or evaluate how many people paid attention to that campaign. Secondly, you can also check to see behavior. What does behavior do? Behavior measures the impact. It shows that that campaign has impact, or has impacted, the target audience or the community that you intended for. Then impact is what truly matters, because at the end of the day, you can have engagements, yet you may not have impact. So you are striving for both engagement and impact. That is what you should look out for in this context, okay? In measuring in measuring your campaign's effectiveness. Now, how would you improve future campaigns? Seeing, for example, you have had all of that and it was not successful. You would have to also look at using community mobilization strategies, maybe including it in school programs, using local influencers, engaging traditional rulers, working with religious leaders who are, the gatekeepers in the communities that you want this message to penetrate and be, impactful, right? So you would also maybe consider giving out incentives, and then follow up campaigns, say for example quarterly or 6 months, or just depending on how you want to stretch that campaign and the kind of budget that you have. Budget is also very key. So let's take a look at some ethical controversies that come up, when it comes to public relations campaigns and adverts. Okay, what really comes into play? So this next case study is talking about a family detergent advert that kind of went wrong. So a detergent company releases an advert showing only women washing clothes, cooking, cleaning the house, taking care of the children, while the men only relax and watch television. Many viewers now then begin to complain that the advert is promoting unfair gender stereotypes. As a PR practitioner or an advertising advert professional in your organization, what will be the key next steps that you would have to take? Because the truth is, would it attract criticism in a time like this? Modern audiences expect advertisement to reflect diversity, equality, and inclusion. So, this is what takes us to the theories that we learned, and that is for one of them would be the IDA model. The IDA model talks about four key areas that makes an advert, useful: attention, interest, desire, and action. So, for example, if you were doing an ad, what you want to do, you wanted to attract attention, you could use bright colors. For interest, it will be the interesting storyline. For desire, you want people to say, "I want this product." Sell a message that makes it, very, very, very attractive. And for action, you will be saying, "Buy now, get two free if you get one now," and all of that. So those are the things you use to drive, using the IDA model. There are other models, but this is kind of like the basic that you could use when you're designing your strategy. At the end of the day, when we talk about these, what do they call it? These ethical considerations, these also come into play because you would want to put in context, what we talked about earlier about same adverts across, different countries because of culture, language, religion, etc., customs, etc. Those are the things that would determine how you play this. Some communities do not mind that this is what is the storyline that will be played, but others, with in this time and age, would really flag to see just women doing the work, okay, without any form of inclusion or combined effort. So persuasion should never come at the expense of ethics at all. And the truth is, the IDA model reminds us that good advertising captures all of this, but it ends up saying that we should also avoid gender stereotypes, discrimination, lack of diversity, misrepresentation, and even irresponsible messaging. How do we make it work? An ethical advert sells a product while respecting the society. So that should be the key for what it is that we're doing. So these are the some of the ethical issues that you should remember, and take note of to avoid misrepresentation. Okay, the more we take a look at this, it makes it very easy for us to go deep down to see how what are the regulatory bodies that we have. In Nigeria, I'll be using Nigeria as a case study for this. In Nigeria, we have what we okay, or before we go into that, we'll see how we can improve it, because it's also one thing to list out the ethical issues, but what kind of improvements can be made to that particular advert, right? The advert could show men cooking alongside women, working together, or shared household responsibility and inclusive family roles where everybody kind of is happy in the kitchen together, everybody kind of is happy maybe in the laundromat, etc. So all of this makes it that it is very, very it's an inclusive family role, not just segmenting it to say that this is your responsibility, while my responsibility is just to sit and turn on the World Cup to just watch. Just saying that on the side, okay? So, and we move on to seeing a case study, another case study of a clothing ad that goes wrong before we go into the regulatory body. Now, an international clothing company produces an advert for the Nigerian market. The advert includes symbols and languages that many Nigerians consider disrespectful to their culture. Within a few days, that advert has to be pulled down due to criticism on social media, television, and even local radio. So the question would be, how did we get it wrong? It takes us back to the ethical principles that we're talking about. Culture affects a lot of things. So when preparing your communication, you have to be careful not to ignore culture, because ignoring culture will create a whole lot of crisis for you. Imagine, after everything, all the investments that have been put out there, your advert is pulled down either by the regulatory body of that environment, etc. That would affect you even financially. Your revenue is something you're working and hoping that would attract buyers. So if that it fails, it means that you have thrown some money into the trash. So culture affects language, once again, religion, even gestures that could be used or during an ad. These ads we talk about do not necessarily have to be what do they call it, audiovisual arts, adverts, right? They can also be even just pictorial, okay, photographic art, etc. While you are beginning to show all of this in some of your communication products, it would really go a long way to be very sure that the culture that you're sharing this with accepts even the clothing, the gestures from on that particular ad, the food, the colors, the symbols that you're using, and the kind of tradition you're trying to portray. As much as possible, people would want to say, oh, we can use different formats. It does not sell across board for the same. So put this into consideration when working on this. And this takes us to the regulatory body here in Nigeria. So we'll be using Nigeria's regulatory body as a case study. So in this particular section, I'm introducing ACORN. Okay, ACORN is kind of like the culture and crisis management center for advertising in Nigeria. But this is a regulatory body, and we are going to be seeing how it influences communication even in this society. We've already talked about not ignoring cultural differences, because that is what would yes, this is what will create crisis. But how do we manage all of this to even ensure that it doesn't even get to the point where we get into the crisis situation? So that is why Nigeria established the Advertising Regulatory Council of Nigeria, or what we call ACORN. Okay, ACORN lives by these principles, which is clearly on the screen. Okay, and these are some quotes on their website that you get to see, okay, showing what their mandate is about. But if an organization releases an offensive advert, the solution is not to ignore public criticism, okay, because there are different ways that you could work it out. Professional communicators, first of all, you have to apologize, withdraw the advert, then engage stakeholders, correct that mistake, and rebuild trust through transparent communication. These are the ways that you can remedy and salvage your reputation as an organization or a brand. So it is very, very, very key that your PR practitioner or professional is on their feet all the time, just in case you missed out something, very little like that that could cause anything. But Akon is also watching, okay? So that is why we have put this out there today. Akon regulates advertising practices. Their core function is also to approve advertisements before publication, and you would also see that they protect consumers, Their job is also to promote ethical advertising and ensure that professional standards are maintained. All of this is very key, and you can remember that ACORN is standing as Nigeria's apex regulatory authority for advertisements and even marketing communication. So these are their roles. These are the things you should note, be able to remember, because this is what they do. For more information, you can visit their website and see for yourself. But in reality, this is what would help us bridge the gap. So, as we conclude today's session, I hope you now see that international PR and advertising is much more than just writing press releases or producing advertisements. It goes beyond that. It's about understanding people, their culture, perception, behavior, and even using communication strategies in such a way to solve problems, build trust, and meaningful influence. So whether you're representing a country, managing a global brand, or leading a social campaign, or even promoting just a local business, the principles we've discussed here remain the same. Okay, so you have to understand your audience, you have to communicate with purpose, you have to respect culture, you have to be able to measure impact, and always communicate ethically. So from today, don't just watch advertisements or follow, communication campaigns. Try to analyze them. Not everything that flies should fly. So you ask yourself, why do they work, why they fail, and what you would do differently, even as an expert. I think these are also some of the questions that will be asked you if, for example, you were running for a position in PR or advertising or even communication, in communications. They would ask you questions like, what have you seen? What did you like? What can we change? These are some of the things or the values that you will bring, to the workplace. My name is Dr. Roxy Ola Akuma, and if you found this session very valuable, I want to say please don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on the notification so that you never miss any of our future episodes. Thank you for watching, and I want to say that I'll see you on the next one. It's bye for now.